It's the year 2056, and Earth is completely different. The world is in crisis due to environmental issues, and corporations care more about profits than people. Let's talk about Rubicon. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch Or Pass. Today I'm talking about Rubicon, which is coming to theaters and on demand on July 1st, 2022. It is a sci-fi thriller from director Leni Lauritsch and stars Franz Richter, George Blagden, and Mark Ivanir. My hot take is I think you should watch it. I was kind of between a watch and a rental, but it does so much right. The set and the effects are really, really good. I liked the characters, and I like the overall story and the themes. It does have a little bit of a slowdown, and the ending does come fairly abruptly. But overall, I was very impressed with this film and kind of what director Leni Lauritsch did on, I imagine, a shoestring budget and with very limited constraints. Like, the film has just a really great feel to it. It feels like a good sci-fi space film. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and go into the ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers at the ending section. So if you don't want to know what happens in the film, turn it off when they get to the ending. But before that, you can watch, get my general thoughts. I will keep it vague and general until the ending part. So you can keep watching until I get there. And I will give you a warning when I do get to the spoilers. So in Rubicon, the year is 2056. And states and nations no longer exist. Everything is controlled by corporations. And so corporations control land, and they control, various aspects of your life. And the wealthy retreat to these sealed biodomes that are like keeping the people in the dome safe. And those who can't afford are out in the earth as the environment is kind of like slowly being destroyed. People are dying from pollution. People are dying from starvation. And in this kind of setting, you have Hannah and Gavin, who are sent up to the Rubicon, which is like a research space station. You can think of it as the ISS, but it's owned by this company, Nebra, and they are doing experiments into algae to try to figure out if they can grow some algae that will then be able to sustain air in a closed environment. So they're growing the algae on the space station to try to recirculate the CO2 in the space station and make a livable environment. So Hannah and Gavin are sent up to collect this algae, and almost immediately from the start, things start going badly. Things I liked about this film. The first, the set and the effects. The film has a really, really well done set. I was impressed by just how much detail and how kind of realistic it looks. This is an indie film. You don't normally get sets that look this high tech, this space age. I talked to the director, Leni Lauritsch, and she said that she really focused a lot on the actual set and the practical effects. She wanted to make sure that everything felt right. And this film does that. It gets that perfectly well. You definitely feel like you're on a space station. There's a lot to look at. It doesn't feel bare bones. It feels, it feels appropriately high tech. It feels like there's a lot going on. Like the doors open automatically. There's airlocks. There are plenty of really good effects that transport you to this place. And I also really loved the use of CGI, because a lot of indie films, you'll have some CGI scenes that just look really off, but here they were very smart with what they did CGI and what they did practical. And so it's a space film, you're going to have some CGI, and they do have some CGI aspects, but for the most part it is either doing something that can't be done, and even then it looks very good, or it's just kind of accenting things that they did practically. And so it gives you this nice seamless experience that feels like a much bigger budget movie than this actually was. The second thing I love are the characters. Now, there aren't a ton in this movie, but each of them has a very interesting past and some very different motivations and internal struggles as this film goes on. The actors all do a great job. They spend a lot of time together, and the characters are different and interesting enough that they give some nice texture to the relationships and the conflicts that happen while everyone is up at the Rubicon. The third thing I liked is the mystery. There is some mystery in what is happening back down on Earth. There's some mystery with different things that happen with the characters up on the space station, and it keeps you engaged in the story as it goes on, because there are plenty of twists, plenty of turns. Some characters don't give all the information about their backstory at the start, and you learn it as the film goes on. Some characters become closer, some characters have conflicts, and overall there's a nice amount of depth to these characters that keeps it interesting despite only having a few main ones. And the last thing I really love is the overall story and the themes. Now, this is clearly kind of a film that is trying to comment on current events that are happening. The director actually wrote this because she was inspired by an internet meme, actually, about what happened. What would people on the ISS do if something happened on Earth? And then she pulled in different aspects of our life now, like different things that are happening, different crises, and it just kind of amplified them up for this film. And so, as the film progresses, there are clear messages and clear themes that are applicable to our lives now, even though the film is set in 2056 up in space. There's definitely a lot to pull from this and a lot to kind of relate to, despite having such a vast difference in both technology and time. And so I really like that. I like to have those themes tied in, and also, you know, just how they fit in with the story. It didn't feel like anything was kind of like shoehorned in. It felt like it was a very natural story and a very natural kind of worst case scenario with certain things that are happening today. So things I didn't love as much. And like I said, I recommended you watch this. So neither of these are that bad. So the first thing I didn't love as much is there are some slow sections. Look, it's kind of an isolationist disaster thriller. You have people that are stuck on a space station. There are going to be some slow times. And overall, like, things still happen. There are still crises that have to get dealt with. There are still, conflicts and relationships that happen. So it's not super slow, but there are some slow sections towards the middle of the film. It has a really kind of exciting start and kind of a climactic type of ending. And in the middle, it does slow down a little bit. It's not bad. Like I said, I still recommend that you watch this, but it's just something I noticed. And the last thing I didn't really love, and this was kind of a little bit more jarring, but it didn't kill my overall enjoyment of the film. The film has a pretty quick end. I mean, you have a very long buildup in this film. The film is 110 minutes, so an hour, 50 minutes. But at some point, there is kind of an abrupt switch to the ending sequence, and it comes very quickly. There's not really much of a transition when it happens, and all of a sudden, things are very different. And I was a little bit shocked when it happened. I eventually got what was happening. There was a natural kind of progression, but it did feel like there was a very abrupt shift. And so I actually kind of wish that there was a little bit more time. I feel like you could have another 15 or 20 minutes to see what happened in the interim of that time period. The film is already fairly long, 110 minutes. I would have happily spent a little bit more time with these characters. I really did like the film. I liked, despite me complaining that it was a little bit slow, I liked the film. I liked the characters. I would have been happy to spend 15, 20 more minutes with them to kind of fill that out. But, it's an indie film. There was probably budget issues or time issues, or, maybe they wanted that mystery. So the ending hit very quickly. So that was kind of a shocking incident. But overall, the ending was very good also. So not a big criticism. Like I said, the two things I didn't love are minor. I wouldn't worry too much about them. I definitely think you should check it out now. So going into the ending, here is where there will be spoilers. If you don't want to know what happens in the film, turn this off now. I'm going to go with a little bit about the plot and then go into the actual ending itself. And then I can tell you about that abrupt change. So, like I said, in Rubicon, you have Hannah and Gavin, who are going up to this space station that has a few people. The most notable is Dimitri. He's like an old scientist who is kind of controlling the algae growth, the algae experiment, where they're trying to grow algae that will sustain the space station and kind of, overall sustain a closed environment, because the Earth is getting destroyed. You're going to need to kind of have these sealed environments, and you need you need something to convert CO2 into oxygen, and in this case, it's algae. So early on, Dimitri's son and a few other members of the space station are killed on a mission. I think they went to go deliver algae to Earth, and when they got to Earth, they weren't expecting what was happening, and they all got killed. You don't really know what happens, but you also see from the station, Earth is slowly being kind of enveloped by this brown cloud. And so at the start, you're not really sure what that is. As the movie progresses, you find out it's like a poison gas cloud that is slowly covering up the Earth and essentially killing everyone who isn't protected in special bunkers or domes that are airtight. Dimitri's son and that crew, I don't think, expected that. They didn't really know what to expect. And so when they got there, it turned out very poorly for them. So you're only left with Dimitri, Gavin, and Hannah. And they try to continue the work. Hannah is on like a special mission where she is supposed to find the best strain of algae and then send that back down to Earth. It's a secret military mission. She is a soldier, and that is kind of her overall goal. It's codenamed Icarus. But early on, after that, space crew goes down, they lose connection with the outside world. It seems like the poison gas cloud is getting worse and worse, and they start to lose their connection. And so now Hannah is kind of at a crossroads. She has this mission, but she doesn't really know if anyone is alive down there. And she also is getting to know Gavin and Dimitri and liking them both. So she doesn't necessarily want to send the algae down and doom the space station, even though that would be better for Earth. And then early on, Hannah and Gavin start a relationship. And this was a pretty abrupt change. Like, look, I guess you think you're the last people alive, you're in a space station. Eventually relationships are going to happen, but it felt like this was just like an instant change. There was almost no hint that they were going to start a relationship. All of a sudden, boom, it happened. And Hannah becomes pregnant, which she wasn't supposed to be able to do. As a military member, they suppressed her hormones, her ability to have children, for the length of her service in this fictional world. But I guess the hormone suppressor that's kind of built into her ear wasn't communicating with the base station because everything was messed up on Earth. And so that stopped preventing her hormones, which meant that she could get pregnant. So she never thought she was going to. Now Hannah's pregnant. Now we have more kind of big choices because remember, Earth is kind of being destroyed. Hannah, Dimitri, and Gavin have this algae that might be able to help Earth, and especially might be able to help anyone that is kind of trapped in a dome and running out of oxygen. And so, you know, for the greater good, you would think they would just send the algae down to Earth to help out. But that might not be so good for them, and it might also not be so good for Hannah's baby. And so they have internal struggles here. Hannah starts to kind of want to stay. She doesn't really want to risk herself and her child for this mission. Gavin is more kind of altruistic. He wants to help the rest of Earth. He keeps thinking of it in terms of like a greater good. Eventually they make contact with a bunker that has 300 people, but they're running out of oxygen. And so the big conflict here is, do they send the algae down? Do they risk their own lives and the life of Hannah and Gavin's baby? Or do they stay up on the Rubicon where they know they're safe and they know they can just kind of live out their life up there and just kind of say, well, sorry, Earth, that's it. And that becomes a big struggle. Hannah, like I said, is more kind of on the stay side. Gavin is more on the we are going side, and Dimitri is way, way more on the stay side. And there's a few attempts where they try to send algae down, but things go wrong for various reasons. One of the attempts, Dimitri, who just wanted to slow their progress, didn't want them to leave the station, like turned off the cooling to this pod that they were going to use to get down there, and that caused it to overheat, and that caused it to explode. He didn't want it to explode, but that was just what happened. So that was one attempt. Another attempt, when Gavin found out about Hannah's special mission, Project Icarus, where she was going to just kind of detach the whole algae lab if they had a good strain and send that back down to Earth. He was like, well, I mean, the algae lab, if the algae lab can go down, then we can retrofit it to get down there too. And he really gets started on trying to send the algae lab down. He wants to fix everything. But Hannah at this point is worried. She doesn't know if they'll survive the trip. She is getting attached to this baby inside of her. And I think she just wants to stay, play it safe. She doesn't know what's happening on Earth, but she wants to stay up here on the Rubicon. So she eventually actually sabotages the attempt, stops the lab from going down. That was the second attempt to send algae back down to Earth. Now, Gavin, like I said, he's more of the greater good type. He, thinks of these 300 people in this bunker and how they are running out of oxygen. They only have a few days left. And so he tries to force the issue. And eventually he kills himself. And this was in order to force Hannah and Dimitri to go back down to Earth, because earlier Dimitri had told Gavin that they need 3 people alive for the overall system to work, to generate, I guess, enough CO2 for the algae to be able to convert it and to kind of keep all the gas levels stable. We find out after Gavin kills himself, Hannah's like, well, he forces will on us. He's forcing us to go down there. Let's get started. And Dimitri is kind of struck by this because he's like, wait, like, he didn't remember that he told him that he needed 3 people alive. And that was actually a lie. So when Dimitri realizes this, he starts to kind of break down. He didn't think that what he said was going to cause Gavin to die. He actually wanted to save Gavin. Gavin was distraught when the Earth cloud started to kind of envelop the Earth. And he had tried to kill himself earlier. So Dimitri said that to prevent Gavin from doing anything else. Unfortunately, what Dimitri said then later caused Gavin to kill himself. And Dimitri is a little bit despondent about that. So he starts freaking out. And Hannah just kind of tells him, stop it. We have to just do what we have to do. So presumably they are going to finish up Project Icarus, get the algae back down to Earth, and see what happens with their lives. But then the movie cuts fairly abruptly, and you see a little girl. I can't tell her age. I think she's probably 5-ish in here. And Hannah, who at this point has a little bit longer hair. She had very, very short hair because she was, in the military earlier, and now she has a little bit longer hair. So you can tell some time has passed because there's a 5-year-old girl and because Hannah has longer hair. And they're playing, they're pretty happy. They're up on the Rubicon with Dimitri, who is also fairly happy. Like, they all seem to be like a happy kind of family. They're up here, and then that little girl sneaks out later and finds one of their old like radios that they had used to communicate with Earth, and someone's talking on it. So the kid, starts talking to them, and it's a really cute scene because she has never kind of communicated with anyone else. She only knows the space station. So when she hears these voices coming from the box, she says, like, "Are you in the box?" Like, thinking that the box is like making the noise, not understanding that she's communicating with Earth. But on the other side are some kids who, say, "Hey, can you come and play? Can you come and play? We're in the South camps." And she says, like, "No, I can't. We're stuck here." And like, "Oh, you must be in the North camp." So you get the idea that there's something happening. Like the South, like the Earth is getting better. Kids in the South are doing all right. The North, there's still people alive, but there are some issues. And they talk briefly, and you also find out what this child's name is, the child that Hannah and Gavin had. Her name is Kopf. And that was the name of Hannah's sister, who she had tried to save. She tried to like join the military to save her and like get her out of debt and make sure that she stayed safe while the Earth was being destroyed. And you find out partway through the movie that she died in the gas clouds due to some fairly callous actions. So this child is named Kopf. Hannah kind of named her after her sister. And then after she talks to these kids for a little bit, she looks out at the window and you see Earth, and Earth is now blue. Like, it's much more blue. It looks much better. Before, it had been kind of being enveloped by a gas cloud. Now it looks like, it's getting back to normal. People are safe. And that is the end of the film. The implication is that I guess they must have sent down at least either a second algae probe or the lab itself to help people out. They stayed on the station. Presumably they had enough algae to keep the station alive and keep themselves alive, but they sent the lab down to help Earth, and their actions saved Earth and caused life to come back. Now, like I said, it's a pretty abrupt transition. I would have liked to maybe have a little bit more in that middle, like to see what Hannah and Dimitri actually did, and then maybe see like a few scenes of why they decided to stay on there. It seems like everyone's happy, so I think it all worked out. I guess they probably just didn't want to risk, their lives and the life of the child to send it down. So they just sent the algae down, kind of dooming themselves up on this station for the time being. And in the process, saved Earth. So I just wish that there was a little bit more, because it is quite an abrupt transition. I also didn't love when Gavin killed himself, because like he was very much focused on the 300 versus the 3 and trying to make sure that Earth was saved, which, noble goals, good kind of view of it. But he also had a child on the way, and he had a relationship with Hannah. So it felt weird that he would commit suicide. I guess he thought that was the only way to kind of make it happen, which it seemed like it was, like that was a catalyst. But when he committed suicide, it felt like there was more for him left on the space station. And so it was a good plot device. It was a good way to kind of force the issue. I just didn't love that scene. But overall, like I said, I think this is a very well done movie. I think the sets are spectacular. The effects are really, really good. And it has a lot of interesting themes. Like I said, I wish that there was more. And that's always a good thing, when I wish that there was more for a movie that's already an hour and 50 minutes. So that is Rubicon. It comes out July 1st, 2022 in theaters and on demand. I think you should definitely check it out. And thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. And please check out my other content. For this movie specifically, I have an interview with the director, Leni Lauritsch, and the star, Julia Fraser Richter. So you can check that out on my channel. And thanks so much for watching.